Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam Sufalam, Malaya Shitalam, Sasya Shamalam Mataram, Vande Mataram. Subhrajyotsna Purakitayaminim Pullakusumita Drumadalashobhinim Suhasinim Sumadhurabhashinim Sukhadam Varadam Mataram Vande Mataram Vande Mataram.
So, today we have a personality with us who believes that intelligence without fearlessness is lame, and fearlessness without intelligence is dangerous. He opines that quest for truth requires fearlessness and intelligence. Otherwise, it is dogmatic quest as blind follower. This dignitary is the author of some game-changing books such as Breaking India, Being Different, Indra's Net, Invading the Secret, and his latest book is about the battle for Sanskrit. So yes, this personality is none other than Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji. Please welcome our guest with huge round of applause. So please occupy the chair on the dais. So as per our Indian tradition, I would request Professor Karmakar to welcome our guest on behalf of IIT Madras by presenting the fruit basket. I would like to give just a brief about our guest, Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji. He is an Indian-American researcher, writer, speaker, and public intellectual on current affairs as they relate to civilizations, cross-cultural encounters, religion, and science. He has served in multiple careers, including software development executive, Fortune 100 senior corporate executive, strategic consultant, and successful entrepreneur in the information technology and media industries. At the peak of his career, when he owned 20 companies in several countries, he took early retirement at the age 44 to pursue philanthropy, research, and public service. He established Infinity Foundation for this purpose in the year 1994. Currently, he is the full-time founder-director of Infinity Foundation in Princeton, NJ. He also serves as chairman of the board of governors of the Center for Indic Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and is advisor to various organizations. Today, Rajiv sir will share his thoughts on contemporary Indology studies and will provide a critical overview of that. So now I would request Rajiv sir to address the audience. Thank you.
It's a delight to be here. I was here for a previous book launch, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I recognized the auditorium and some of the faculty the moment I entered. Such an honor. Thank you very much. You know, you're part of the tech revolution and part of India's pride that we can supply the world with IT. So if we can supply the world with IT and supply the world with things like pharmaceuticals, R&D, and automobiles and many other things, then isn't it a shame that in the field of Indology, which is the study of Indian civilization, not only are we unable to supply them, we are consumers while the West are producers. So it's so ironic. We can teach them all kinds of things, but we are no longer with the adhikar, with the authority, with the knowledge production capacity and quality to control the discourse about who we are. That's very, very ironic, I would think. So I've coined the term Swadeshi Indology. And I'll talk about Swadeshi Indology versus Videshi Indology. Yeah? Because in the case of IT, the product itself is the same. Natural laws, as opposed to humanities, in the case of natural laws, the laws of physics are the same, no matter who discovers. How you apply it is this, the principles are the same. There is no subjectivity of human interpretation in that sense, because you're dealing with something external to human beings. How you look at it is our way, but there is a certain external truth that we are discovering. In the case of humanities, in the case of civilizations, it's not so objective. It's not, there is no absolute sort of external truth as such. Everybody has a view. People have different histories, and they've come up with different ways of looking at the world, what the ultimate truth is in their own way. And so different civilizations have different claims. I call them truth claims, their claim of truth. So in the case of studying civilizations, it's even more important to control the discourse about your own civilization. Because if you don't control the discourse about yourself, somebody else controls it. Now that's how I define insiders and outsiders. Insiders are people who accept the basic premises of a civilization. So in the case of Vedic civilization, it would be Vedic premises, the Vedas as Shruti. There would be certain Shraddha for it, a certain sadhana. There would be a certain investment in it, in that way of life. So all that would characterize the insiders, and the outsiders would be people who are looking at it as the civilization of some other people. Now this is not race-oriented or ethnic-oriented divide. Plenty of Westerners I know are actually deeply immersed in Vedic civilization, and they are insiders. I know people like that. And now a very, very large percent of people who take the outsider view, not only a neutrally outsider view, but a hostile view towards our civilization, happen to be Indians. So a lot of outsiders to our tradition are Indians. So it's not an ethnic insider-outsider, it's a question of which worldview you subscribe to. I must say that I know some Chinese who are Chinese Indologists who look at, I met them at a Vedanta Congress, and they very deeply involved in the study of Vedanta from a very sincere and authentic point of view. I know some Japanese like that. One Ruchi Abi, I met 15 years ago. He was the one who first told me the Indian origin of many deities in Buddhist temples in Japan. He started explaining to me with great fondness, because he was happy that somebody wanted to talk about it. He thought that not enough Indians are interested in that. And he is the one who told me about the Indian origin of some of the martial arts in Japan. And then the influences of Sanskrit on Japanese language. So people, especially in the Far East, are different than Western Indology in the sense that they've never had a reason to sort of knock it down. They've looked at it in a different way. In Japan, China, and many of these countries were the recipients of a whole lot of Indian exports of knowledge, which we call Buddhist export, but actually it was not just Buddhist export. Along with Buddhism went knowledge of mathematics and agriculture and astronomy and a whole lot of knowledge systems, medicine and so forth. The West also received this generally through the Arabs, and somewhere along the way it would get distorted, convoluted, it would get recharacterized as Arabic numerals, for example, and Arabic mathematics, or some other way it would get twisted around. So the West never really accepted the Indian origins of so much of their civilization. Plus, the Japan, China, and these East Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, were never into world conquest in terms of civilizational conquest. So they didn't have a need to knock down. They didn't have a need to say, we are superior to you, how could you have educated us? Whereas Europe and Christianity have a long history of that, and it would be very awkward for them to admit that many of the things they consider to be Western civilization are not Western at all. And it's not just India that has given them things that they haven't acknowledged. So I don't want to characterize my views as sort of Indians versus Westerners. It's one worldview contrasted with another worldview. Besides the contrast, I also want to say that the nature of this contrast is not hostility. It's just that we disagree. You're a scientist, so you have a certain model. Somebody else has a different model, different way of looking at it. And you debate, you argue, you give positions and counterpositions. So we have a great debating tradition where disagreements are sorted out in a very mutually respectful manner. And it is not about anger, knocking somebody down in a personal way, personal attack, and so on. I write very tough critiques. Therefore, I have to be very careful to make sure people don't think that I'm attacking the person, because I'm not. And I'm also very interested in encouraging my followers and supporters, a lot of people on social media and so on, to be respectful of the people I critique, because it's their ideas I critique. I'm not knocking them down as individuals. Yeah. Now, to this book called The Battle for Sanskrit just came out. It came out in the midst of controversy even before it came out, because of attempts to stop it from coming out. I disclosed some of its ideas in the Bangkok World Sanskrit Congress, and immediately there was a polarization. A lot of the Indian scholars who were there, Buddhist scholars from all these countries who were there, they were excited, very happy. I got all kind of congratulatory letters. They said it's the first time somebody has actually written a book, so we're looking forward to it. But then a huge amount of Western Indologists started attacking it. And then there was a petition to ask the publishers to ban all my books because I'm a bad guy. Something from the people, the very same people who promote intellectual freedom. It seemed that some people are more entitled to it than others. And then I must say that the reason I say this to every audience is I recognize people who helped me make this book possible, because when the petition came out to ban the book, they got 250 signatures from many important Indologists and their students and so on. And then some people from our side developed a counter petition that said that we must let this book come out, and all their claims were false. And a lot of people helped popularize this counter petition, and we got 11,000 signatures. So we got 40 times as many. But then they stopped this petition business, and they started writing articles. And foolishly, the lead article that started this bandwagon against my book, which hadn't even come out yet, it was actually an attack on me personally, because as a consequence of that, they wouldn't want my book to be out. The lead assault came from the Hindu newspaper in your city, which sometimes I think should be called the anti-Hindu. Now, it would be one thing to criticize an author that you've made familiar to your readers. If they had known who's this Rajiv Malhotra, then of course it's fair that you also criticize him. But for every single book, this is the 5th book I've done, we send the book as a sample for reviewing, and they totally ignore it. So I am unimportant when it comes to reviewing my book, but when it comes to attacking me, I become so important, it's a front page big article. An unknown author to them suddenly becomes worth criticizing and attacking so much. And then when I wrote to the publisher that I want a right to give my response, because it was full of factual errors, full of ad hominem attacks, full of slander and all kinds of defamation, I just wanted a right to respond. I wouldn't be given that response. I was not given that right. And eventually, after pressing it enough times, they wrote an article in the newspaper on our editorial discretion gives us the right to deny Rajiv Malhotra a response. In other words, it was not communicated to me in a private email that we are not able to take your response. The response that rejecting my right to write anything. Their response, their decision not to allow me to write, was communicated in their newspaper in an article. So that's how weird and strange the so-called free media can be, and yet they go around talking and complaining about intolerance. Yeah. So I would say this book took a lot of challenges along the way. I don't want to go into some of the real gory details because it will just be awkward for a lot of people who supported me. But suffice it to say that I was on a vacation in Florida for the first time after a few years. I had time. I thought, okay, now it's in the press. It went to Manipal Press in Karnataka to be printed, and printing started. And so I was so happy. My wife and I, we went to Florida for a vacation for the first time. But within 2 nights, I got a call, emergency call from India saying printing has been stopped. And so some details I won't give you of some people taking some action or threatening or coming up with red flags that convinced that this should be stopped. So I had to fly back to Delhi and really take control of the situation and give them all the answers, give them responses, reassure them, whatever little details they wanted, just technicalities. I had to go and satisfy all those technicalities. And then it got delayed by 2 weeks and so on. So until I got a copy of this in my hands, I really wasn't sure what exactly is going to happen. So I'm glad to say that we have won the first battle for Sanskrit. So you see, there must be something that is very threatening. I mean, there has to be something that really threatens. So I'll tell you what some of the things are. Because, you know, Indology is a field that is traditionally controlled by Europeans, and then after World War II by Americans. When the Europeans controlled it, it was called Orientalism. I call it European Orientalism. And then when Americans control it, they say, no, we are not Orientalists, we are post-Orientalists. But I coined the term American Orientalism, saying you are American Orientalists. The fact that you are different from European Orientalists, it doesn't mean that you are not Orientalists, you are American Orientalists. And I give a whole history of American Orientalism. What are the specific qualities of that lens? It's a lens, it's not ethnicity or anything, it's a certain way of looking. And the American Orientalists have done a better job than the previous ones in educating a large army of Indians to think like them. So a whole lot of Indian, I call them sepoys, intellectual sepoys, have been trained in these Ivy Leagues, sent back, and they populate some of the prestigious universities in India in humanities departments. I don't know if I'm in trouble with IIT or not. Yeah. So, but you know, just to make you feel reassured, I'm giving a talk on this very topic, saying all these things. In February 1 is Jawaharlal Nehru University. Okay. And I've given 5 or 6 talks before. So students love it. Students love it. Beyond that, I won't say. But students love it. And I'm also giving a talk in the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Bombay, which is also a hub of this left kind of thing. So I'm quite relaxed and used to it, you know. This is part of the territory. You have to stick your neck out, get out of the comfort zone, take your hits, take the risk, and learn from it. You become a better player. The more vicious these guys trying to get you out, the more you can hit them back, you can improve your game. So it's also a technique of learning by arguing. Arguing also helps you improve your arguments. So this whole field of Indology I'm critiquing, there has never been such a thorough analysis of the major leader Sanskrit studies, Indology in the West, from a traditional Indian point of view. The people best qualified to do this are not people like me, but traditional scholars. Traditional scholars have a lot of answers, but they don't do it. I was in the Sanskrit University today, this morning, giving a talk, and one in the Karnataka Sanskrit University a few days ago, and in many other places. And I found that they're quite honest about it. First of all, they are in a cocoon, in a silo, and not sure whether they should respond, not respond. They get a lot of bright students from the West coming to study at their feet, and these students are so smart, so respectful. Our teachers give them all the knowledge, but then our teachers don't follow up to see what the guy does when he goes back to the West. What exactly did he publish? Did he distort? Was he here just being a good guy, sucking this knowledge and then publishing something else? They don't follow up. They're also scared of that. Some of them lack knowledge of English. Many of them know English, but they don't know the idiom in which it is studied. You see, if you know English, to study medical journal, you also need to know the medicine vocabulary. To study IT, you need to know some vocabulary. So there is a certain vocabulary in this particular specialty. It's not common English, and therefore they refer to Indology is written in a language that is filled with references to Western thinkers. So, for example, Vico is a German thinker of the 17th century who is cited as the authority on the transcendent realm and the worldly realm, what we would call Paramarthika and Vyavaharika, the transcendence, the sacred realm, and the worldly realm of material stuff. And based on this guy's theory, an argument is made that the Vedic Paramarthika should be rejected. So it's a very strange thing. Our Vedic scholar would have to first understand who's this Vico, what exactly was his argument, and that would take a long time. You cannot sitting here do that. And then Benjamin comes up with his theory that language spreads because the elite, in certain languages and cultures spread because the ruling elite use it for aesthetic purposes. It's called the aestheticization of power. Their power is presented in a very aesthetic way. The population gets fooled. The analogy is given of a puppet, and the puppet is what you see, and you're very impressed by this puppet. What you don't see are the strings being pulled and the puppet master behind the curtain. So the puppet master behind the curtain is this fellow, this very nasty fellow, and he's hidden. His motive is hidden. All you see is the puppet he's playing. So this art, poetry, kavya, dance, performance of Ramayana, all these things are accused of being the aesthetic front in front of the curtain, whereas the real motive, the sinister designs behind the curtain are kept away from you. So all this is the work of a guy called Benjamin. Now, nobody here would have heard of him. And he was the head of one of the founding fathers of the Marxist school of Frankfurt Marxist school. They came up with this theory to explain the rise of Nazis because the Nazis were doing all this. So they developed this theory to explain Nazism's use of aesthetics and literature, and then Indologists took it and said, okay, we will apply it to explain the spread of Sanskrit. So Sanskrit is now kind of like accused of being a similar sort of reason for its spread, a political doctrine, a political virus that spread in this way. This kind of thing. And then Gramsci was the head of the Italian Communist Party or something. He was a famous guy. His postmodernist theory. A lot of this postmodernist theory, 20th century Marxist theory, feminist theory, these are the kind of ideologies, Siddhanta. These are Western Siddhanta being used to interpret us. So a traditional scholar would have to know not only English, but he'd have to understand the Western Siddhanta, Western thought, Western history. And to do that, he'd have to go to some Western place. And then by the time he studied all that, he's been brainwashed. This is what happens. And that's how the army of sepoys has been built. That you entice these bright people who want to study and you tell them, okay, you study us, we study you, you teach us, we teach you. The difference being that the Western Indologists got a strategy. And therefore, when they're studying the Indian side, there's a strategy. And the Indian has no strategy. He's just a very humble, straightforward guy. He's taking it at face value and he's saying it's knowledge exchange for knowledge. But he doesn't realize there's a game going on. So we have a problem if we educate our traditional people in Western thought too much. They tend to get switched over, especially if this training is done overseas. If we don't, then they're ill-equipped to give a response. British had a similar dilemma. During the East India Company, they wanted to train all the officers to rule over the Indians with knowledge. So you would become an expert in ruling Bengal. You learn Bengali and all that, or Madras presidency, there you know Tamil. So you would know about castes, and you would know about the difference between Hindus and Muslims, and what divides them, and how to respect them, and how to play one against the other, and how to win over somebody and all that. These are the things that they wanted to teach. But they set up colleges in India. And when they did that, they found that a lot of the people would come to India and they would switch. They would get married to some local person and they'd switch, become Indian. They called it going native. Going native means you've deserted. So the East India Company has this dilemma: how to teach them enough about India and its civilization, but in a way that people would stay loyal to their British identity. So they set up in places like Oxford and so on, they would set up 20 India studies, Indology colleges, 20 of them during the British era, in different parts of Britain. So the first level of indoctrination will be done on home territory in Britain, so that the person learns to study India as the other, not immersed and thinking that I can also be part of it. So it was very clear, he's taught that he's British, he's ruler, he's superior, and we are going to teach you about them, and when you go there you have to keep this distance. You have to keep the distance between yourself and them. You can pretend, talk in Hindi and all that stuff, and pretend that you're a very friendly guy, but always at the end know that you are, who they are. And then they had finishing schools in India, where you would come and get a touch-up, but by then your identity was secure. So they did all that. So maybe we have to do something like that. We have to, if we want to do Purva Paksha or study of Western Indology, we have to start those things here. We have to start them here and teach people Western Indology in the safety of Indian climate. Maybe this is what gurus have to do, because the people who go there are already very secure about their Indian identity. And I'm going to be meeting Sri Ravi Shankar on the 24th, and he's going to launch this book in his ashram in Bangalore. So one of the things I'm going to request is maybe we got to start these kind of Swadeshi Indology right here. And so once this is done, then we can send these people for more advanced knowledge. Right now, when the young person goes, they usually come back switched. This come back very turned around. So a large number of Videshi Indologists have been trained and brought back into India and put into prestigious universities in humanities departments. Many of them won't even let me come and speak, so much for their free speech. IIT Bombay, they refused to let me speak 3 trips in a row. And it was a very brave Ganesh Ramakrishnan, professor, who fought. He's in the computer science department, who argued, stuck his neck out. And then when I went, it was a huge crowd and it was a tremendous success. I had a live debate with one of their leftist persons in the audience, and which is on YouTube, you can watch it. And now I'm back. On the 27th, I'm going to IIT Bombay, and it'll be in the main convention hall, main convocation. It has 2,000 capacity, and Subhash Chandra ZTV is going to launch this book there. So we've come quite a ways in terms of entering into their turf, from being a person who's untouchable and not allowed, to being somebody whose book is going to be honored in their largest auditorium. So we've come a long way by fighting. This is what it takes. The basic issue, I'm going to give you 5 or 6 basic issues I have with the Swadeshi, with the Videshi Indology, and then I'd like to have questions. The oral tradition is one of the hallmarks of our civilization, oral tradition, because the qualities of language and higher states of consciousness that are considered the ultimate, the most important, are not written external to yourself. They're embodied, they're part of who you are. You activate these things. And so the transmission from teacher to student is an oral transmission. The system of learning, chanting mantras, going inward and evolving if those of you who've practiced meditation. How many of you have done some meditation? Wow, excellent, decent number. Okay, so if you are meditating, it's an inner process. It's either silence and observing, like in Vipassana, or like in transcendental meditation, repeating a mantra and various other methods, various other systems of meditation. But it's not something about writing. You don't have to be literate at all. You don't have to know how to read and write to know how to meditate. Yeah? You don't have to be literate to do yoga, be an advanced yogi. You don't have to learn. You don't have to read and write to be a great sitar player or music player, because these are not written scores. It's all through listening, and it's all oral. So to deny the legitimacy and the value of the oral tradition, which is what they've done, is quite a tragedy. It's quite a big distortion for us. The position they've taken, the Western Indologists have taken, is that history begins with writing, and the oral tradition is not historical in the sense it doesn't create change and progress, because people are stuck, they can't move forward. They're just going on repeating the same stuff, they're stuck. There's no innovation possible. That is not true, because in very ancient India, you see evolution of grammar, you see evolution of knowledge of astronomy and things of that sort. So it is not that only when writing comes, then evolution happens, because we've had treatises and shastras evolving even as oral traditions. But the rejection of the oral is part of a bigger rejection, which is rejection of the whole sacred, because oral is sort of very linked with sacred. And so this rejection of sacred is described as a rejection of the paramarthika, the transcendental realm. Now, why is this to be rejected? Well, one reason given is that this is very abusive, it's superstitious, it's primitive, and again, people like Vico are introduced that this happened to be the story of the Western civilization, so they assume it must be applicable everywhere. So we are told that as long as you are in this sacred realm and oral tradition, you are kind of primitive and not able to move forward and advance. And so one of the things the West wants to do is to get us out of that. So the attack on the paramarthika is argued on that basis. But it is not just removing something. It's also what they add. You remove you remove one kind of rasa, or one kind of essence, one kind of ingredient. You've depleted it. But then on top of it, you add something else. They're adding two things. So they're removing one and adding two. They're removing the sacred, and they're adding oppressiveness as a quality and political domination as a quality. So these texts, the whole tradition, is serving the needs of political oppression, political domination and social oppression. So the style of studying the texts is not about looking for sacredness and teaching sacredness and people using this to be better human beings and be connected with their worldview. They are looking at it as a system of analysis. The study is, from their point of view, a system of looking for who oppressed whom. Did men oppress women? Let's look for it. Did they oppress Shudras? Did they oppress this and that? So it's a search, it's a quest for looking for human rights violations in the sacred text, in what we call sacred texts. So when somebody like that comes along and says, I love Sanskrit, we must revive it, we must promote it, the Sanskrits are so beautiful, Indians clap. But what you need to know is you need to go back to their books and see what exactly they're meaning. They are saying we need to revive the study of Sanskrit so that we can, with this point of view, we need to revive the study of Sanskrit from a political philology point of view. Political philology is philology means the study of texts with the intent of looking for political intentions, political motives, political drama that goes on in those texts. The politics hidden in the text, maybe these guys didn't know it even. Maybe the Brahmin is just doing this yagna and it doesn't seem anything political, but really it is political. That's what they want you to know. So they can take out the political intent that you the fellow who's sitting there doing this yagna for the last so many decades, you don't even know that you are actually being politically oppressive and politically dominating. So they are the doctor who's going to tell this thing about you that you don't even know. It's a hidden toxicity inside you that they are going to excavate and bring it out to the surface. So the use of political philology as a method to study our texts and tell us what is political in them, and then is followed by what they call liberation philology. Liberation philology means to liberate you from those political problems that are in your texts. So we are the doctors who first going to diagnose you, then we're going to treat you. So we're going to diagnose you by telling you what's wrong in your text, what is the oppression contained in your text, and then we are going to teach you by removing all those dangerous things that you shouldn't have in your text. And that is what we mean by revival of Sanskrit. So we are reviving it in a doctored way. We are doctoring the Sanskrit to make it safe, because it's not safe for consumption. So in my book, I give you a lot of quotes and passages from Indologists that I'm critiquing who are saying these sort of things. So you can see that. And the reason I'm touring India at this time is I'm looking for alliances with traditional scholars who are very excited right now about this, to work with me, where I tell them where the problems are and they give me the answers. How to give a rejoinder to this, I give some preliminary answers, but they are much better, they know much more, they can give more detailed answers from our point of view. So I do the what is called Purva Paksh, they can do the Uttar Paksh, they can give the response. So we work as a team, and that's one of my goals in doing this. So the theory that has been developed, theory of languages of India, the theory of Sanskrit spread across South Asia and Southeast Asia, basically says that, it goes as follows. It says that there was a conspiracy between Brahmins and kings. The Brahmin had the technology to aestheticize the king's power, make the king powerful, but in a very beautiful aesthetic way. He would do a yagna to make the king divine and look like he's God in the eyes of the public. And he would have to do it in a way very convincing, the public would buy it. And the king would keep the Brahmin happy by sponsoring him, by funding him. So it's kind of the R&D guy is dishing out exploitative technology, and his client is the guy who needs this to do the exploitation. So there's a nice conspiracy, and it franchises. It's like a franchise across much of Asia, South Asia and Southeast Asia. And this is a happy franchise that goes on for 1,000 years, and they've given it the name Sanskrit Cosmopolis. A very beautiful name, nice cosmopolis. So Indians feel very proud. However, you see, I argue that the reason Sanskrit may have spread in so many places is because of something sacred it brought, which was genuine, not some kind of a political gimmick. Why look at it as some kind of a system of exploitation? Maybe it filled genuine need in people's lives. Maybe people liked the Ramayana because they actually felt that bhakti, they actually felt that link. Maybe the yagnas spread not as some kind of a hocus pocus to fool the people, but it spread because it brought meaning to people's lives. People felt good about it. So it's sort of, it depends on which approach you take, what your starting assumptions are. I think the opponents I have are brilliant people. They're not fools. You cannot say that they don't know what they're doing. They definitely are very smart people. They just start with a set of assumptions I happen to disagree with. And I disagree with respect. It's not anything disrespectful to them. I just feel that the insider perspective needs at least 50% voice. Right now it has very little. These journals and these conferences and all these different committees that decide the top level future course of Indology should not be so dominated by secular people. There should be a large representation of people who are practicing the sacredness of our tradition. They should be present, and their voice should be given at least equal footage. So one of the other major complaints, major positions they've taken which bother me is that the Orientalism, which is accused of, which is a European way of looking at non-Europeans, that's Orientalism, Orientalizing, stereotyping the other. This Orientalism got blamed for being racist by Edward Said, who wrote this book called Orientalism in the early 70s. This started a whole study of post-colonial studies, and Orientalism got accused as being sort of racist. So people who were in Indology suddenly felt that they are being targeted, they are being tainted, they are being accused of being racist. And so they came up with a response, a very clever response: blame the victim. So they came up with a response that Orientalism, Europeans learnt Orientalism from Sanskrit. Sanskrit contained these biases in it. And they come up with what are the biases against Shudras, and there some ethnic groups, and this group are excluded. And that Sanskrit contained a lot of ammunition on how you hate, how you marginalize, how you exclude certain people. And the Europeans, when they studied Sanskrit, picked this up, and they became like that. And then the claim is made, there's a famous paper called Deep Orientalism by Sheldon Pollock. And if you should read that paper. The claim is made in that paper that Nazism benefited from the study of Sanskrit to learn how to hate others. So they learned this business of hatred of others, and the Holocaust was a consequence of the Orientalism latent in Sanskrit itself. That is meant by deep Orientalism, means this Orientalism very deep inside Sanskrit. So Sanskrit has deep Orientalism, and it has haunted Indian society for a long time because Indian society is stuck in this, and we, the West, have to liberate them now. But Sanskrit bondage to this deep Orientalism is what infects the Europeans, and they become Orientalist. So you see, the oppressor of India, those who are oppressing India in the colonial era, learnt it from us. They just came and they figured out there is this hierarchy, these guys oppress this guy, the Raja is superior, the upper caste, lower caste, they're doing all this. And they said, oh, we should start doing it. And so they learnt it, and they just stepped into the shoes of the Indian oppressor. The Indian oppressor was replaced by the European oppressor. The European oppressor took it back to Europe. It was a transfer of technology of oppression. And so we are the originators of this, and not the Europeans. So this is a very good solution to removing the guilt from Orientalism. So they call themselves post-Orientalism, these people, today's people. That we are post-Orientalism. The real Orientalism is in Sanskrit. Our job is to take it out and liberate them. So I don't want them to get off the hook. I've coined the term American Orientalism, Orientalism 2.0, and I'm saying you guys have now become more sophisticated Orientalism than the previous European Orientalism, and I give a whole argument why they are really Orientalist, even though they're more sophisticated, even though they're more politically correct in the way they go about it. Another thing that they have developed is this idea called the death of Sanskrit. There's a paper called The Death of Sanskrit, and it says Sanskrit died 1,000 years ago. And it was killed by Hindu kings who had all kind of issues and problems, and so Sanskrit died in spite of the fact that some Muslim kings tried to save it. But the Hindus would not collaborate. This is a very interesting paper, and there's no accountability given to colonialism. In fact, very clearly it says any attempt to blame the Muslim rule for the decline of Sanskrit must be immediately dismissed. But it doesn't say why. Why are you to dismiss? Why can't I talk about it? I mean, it's sort of not, it had to be dismissed. And so we have to look elsewhere, and then we look for some king who did this and that, and he was bad guy, so it's the kings who, Hindu kings who did it. The term classical language, I don't like for Sanskrit, because the Greek and Latin classical languages are dead languages. They're not living languages. In the Western civilization, the past is not respected. It is killed. Pagans were killed. Greek, Latin languages were killed. But what they needed, they digested. Some rationality, some scientific stuff they digested. They digested selective things and rejected the rest. So the classical languages sit in museums. It's a dead civilization that you go to a museum, they'll say those are the old civilization. And whatever is nutrients, whatever is useful has been sucked out. We do not want to become the Indian Civilization Museum, that the West then takes out all the good things. Like yoga is being turned into Christian yoga. It's a fashion now. And many other things. There is a Vipassana, which is Indian meditation system, is now called mindfulness. And if you call it Indian, then they'll accuse you of saffron, and they'll accuse you of fascism and all these kind of things. They'll accuse you of that. So this business is on one hand, sucking the nutrients out, what I call digestion. And on the other hand, calling it classical with sort of respect and honor. You can put it in a museum and it's not active, it's not living. So it stops being living. Now, Chinese do not call Mandarin a classical language. They say it's a living language. It's an ancient language, but it's living. And the Arabs call their language not classical, it's a living language. Persian is a living language in Persia, and so on. So it's not a choice that you have to be either old and classical or you have to be living and modern, but you can't be both. You can be an old language that is still alive today. Now, the question comes, is Sanskrit really alive? A lot of people ask me that. Sanskrit is encoded in Sanskriti. Sanskrit is encoded in Sanskriti. Sanskriti of dance, Sanskriti of architecture, Sanskriti, the culture and the civilization we have encodes the same structures as Sanskriti. So imagine you have a software structure, an architecture, and that architecture can be manifest in many ways. It can be internally manifest as a bunch of zeros and ones, and outwardly it can be put through a CAD/CAM system. It can be turned into an actual shape and actual physical form. It's really the same structure, two representations of that. So Sanskrit is an architecture. It's sort of the DNA of the Sanskriti, and it is manifest in this Sanskriti, which is very much alive in India. Whether I know how to order a cup of tea in Sanskrit, the point is I understand some of the I really understand some of the non-translatable words in Sanskrit. I use them in my meditation. I use them in my way of thinking. And when I go around, I recognize those structures in various physical forms. So Sanskriti is very much alive, and therefore in that sense, Sanskriti is also very much alive. And therefore people like Sanskrit Bharati are doing a great job reviving even the oral Sanskrit in a very serious way. Now, another theme that is attacked a lot, another text that is attacked a lot is Ramayana. And I show in this book that what starts in the 1980s as a major project to reinterpret Ramayana as some kind of atrocity, some kind of a human rights violation, if you would. They don't use that term in those days. But the interpretation of Ramayana in that way starts, and then it spreads into the academy. A lot of people repeat it in a different way, and then it eventually enters into film, it enters into American school system, it enters into Indian popular culture. Now there is one TV series, some kind of TV series that is going on. What is it called? Siya, yeah, which is all this kind of stuff. So how did these people come up with all this? They did not come up with of their own imagination. You can trace it back to the 1980s. Who started this interpretation? So when people ask me, why do you care about Indology? It is some weird thing on the side, doesn't matter to us. It does matter to us. This is a living example. The whole misinterpretation of Ramayana and how it's become part of mainstream popular culture, and a lot of people are talking in that way, is the result of Indological mischief. You look at Max Miller's Aryan theory, and then it's resulted in Dravidian politics today, right here. There was no concept of Dravidian, we the Dravidian people, no concept like that 200 years ago. There is no Tamil text which talks about we are Dravidian and they're Aryan. That is not an indigenous concept. You don't have those kind of texts. So this idea that these people are racially separate and divided and whatnot is an idea that Indologists came up with. Similarly, caste. We have had Jati and we've had Varna. And we can debate for a long time how Jati and Varna are not the same thing, have not been the same thing as caste. And how Lord Risley in the late 1800s started the census of India to classify the Indian population every 10 years through the census. And he needed a classification grid, and he came up with this caste grid and assigned people their place in this caste hierarchy. And how he gradually over time got people to accept that this is my caste, and then you had to name your caste to get any government, anything with the government. So over time, people got used to just naming their caste, what has been assigned. But originally it was Jati, which is different than caste. Jati and Varna are not the same as caste, and that's a very interesting topic to study. So Indology has had an impact on Indian society and Indian political life. This is definitely the case. Ford Foundation has brought in a few $1 billion, couple $1 billion over some years, and funded thousands of NGOs in certain ideologies. I mean, they're never going to give me 1 rupee for the kind of work I do, but they give a lot of money to certain type of NGOs to push certain ideologies. So these ideologies that start in some Indology center then get pushed through many ways, including the funding agencies that push through NGOs, including the training of intellectual sepoys, including the training of media people. A lot of English-speaking journalists have gone overseas The British Council gives them these trainings, trips to UK, and places like Columbia University and all that School of Journalism train a lot of them. So this, and you know, it's what starts with Indology, then moves into other academic departments like journalism and all these other departments, human rights and so on. And then it goes into more and more popular mainstream areas. Unfortunately, many IS officers, IFS officers I come across are completely into this Videshi ideology, Videshi Indology frame of reference. A lot of politicians, including Hindu politicians, are confused. They've just bought into this, and they haven't woken up to this. I even come across swamis. I come across people who are spiritual Hindu teachers that are quite mixed up about some of these matters. So with that, I think I could go on, but maybe it'll be more interesting to take your questions. Thank you very much for listening, and I'd love to take your questions.
Namaskar, sir. I'm Ashish. I'm a humanities student in IIT Madras.
Okay.
Okay, and I think first of all, I'm very thankful to you to bringing a very different perspective, and it was a quite, a breathing session, I would say. So definitely, I mean, before I come to my question, two quick comments. Number one, this thing you talked about the power politics. That is definitely, I mean, I could completely relate to that in power politics and knowledge creation. And secondly, as a humanities and social science student, I think one of the constraints which I face, this is on a personal level more, is that lack of academic work in popular journals. That's where the job of new academicians who want to come into this field, it becomes difficult because we don't have that kind of work in the so-called academic journals and academic rigor, which makes it difficult for us to to follow that path. So
yes. So what you're saying is absolutely true, if I understand you correctly, that while the West has all these biases, they have more rigor.
Yes.
They have produced, you have to give it to them, they have produced more rigorous, very hard-working, whereas our people will either be lazy, they'll say, why do I have to prove it? I already know it. I know the guy is a bad guy, so I don't have to show it. That doesn't work. You have to prove your case. You cannot. I went to a talk in Bangalore, and one gentleman from a well-respected Sanskrit tradition background. Now stay here, I'll take your second question also, you have two. So a scholar with a very solid background says, we don't need to do all this Purva Paksha because we already know that they are Rakshasas. So I said, but you do not refute, you couldn't prove Newton's physics wrong or Einstein's physics wrong if you found out that he was an immoral person. I mean, that's not no intellectual, no analytical person would buy that argument. You couldn't say that such and such chess player lost because we proved he's a bad character. You couldn't say that this cricketer sixer is no good, but because last night we found he was doing something wrong. That is not the way in a competitive arena, you have to look at the domain of knowledge and win your argument in that domain logically. Our people, I must say, have the habit of being over-emotional and too bombastic and not enough rigor. So we have to introduce. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at the Indian old tradition, the standard of rigor is so immense. The logic is so immense at that time. It's not like something new we have to acquire. And you look at the brains here, we do have the rigor in the fields that we use it. So somehow, today's teachers are not applying the rigor and teaching the rigor in today's problem solving. So you have to take the rigor and apply it to solve today's problems, not memorize how the solutions were in the past. And you can't do it with emotions, you have to do it with intellectual rigor. So I agree with you, we don't have those kind of journals. Part of Swadeshi Indology is to create that ecosystem.
Absolutely. And yeah, second, sir, it was again not a question, but I think which you addressed this. For example, when you talked about Sanskrit and the way the sacredness is being taken out of Sanskrit, which actually makes me also, I mean, at a very personal level, I feel the Sanskrit which comes from, which gets rooted through that direction, it's a very, only at intellectual Sanskrit, there's no divinity you cannot feel the divinity in that. So I think that point was also very well brought out.
Yeah, I'll give you an analogy. Many years ago when there was a tsunami in 2005, so we sponsored one of the Chatrales with the Aim for Seva, which is run by Swami Dayananda Saraswati, his organization. So we sponsored a Chatrale for Nagapattinam village, which was affected. So I went there with a camera crew, and did a documentary, went to Swamiji's Annaikatti, we went to Manjukuti, all his villages, and we did and the boats he was building. So as part of that, we went to Mahabalipuram, and you have these great carvings, you know. Now these carvings are sacred. The difference is very interesting. When a functioning murti, which has you've done pran pratishta, this is deity, this is living sacred deity, is taken over by archaeological survey, which is a secular body. They do not allow the person to worship. They don't allow someone to come and do any, because you know that's wrong. You know that. You know the inside the Shingeri Mutt, the deity of the goddess is an archaeological site. And therefore you're not allowed to do puja there, right? They did not allow. But on the side they've made a little thing, you can do puja there and you can pretend you're doing it here. But you're not allowed to do that because that is under the control of the archaeological site. So there was this poor, humble old man in Mahabalipuram. In the middle of the night, we were there with the camera crew. We saw this guy with some candles and he was doing his puja. So I said, please interpret what he's saying. And this is on a video we have posted in Arshvidya Gurukulam website, Aim for Seva. It's very interesting. He said 4 or 5 generations, his family, they have been doing this. Since the archaeological survey took it over, they do it kind of secretly. But they are the pujaris of this, and he thinks it is his obligation, his dharma to do this. Whether he goes to jail or not, he's going to do it. I was so moved that, and now you see, this is the problem. The turning archaeology is killing the sacred. Now, maybe the archaeologist will praise how beautiful. His way of praising, you should not say, wow, he respects my culture. He's actually killed the culture. It's a dead body. He's praising. It's like somebody says, you're dead, but we make a thing out of you and put it there and we'll praise it. So he's praising the quality of painting, the nice paint, and look at the fine things and that. He'll point out all those good technology aspect of the carving, but it is not sacred. And sacred is banned, in fact. This is a huge problem. This is exactly what is happening to Sanskrit. It's beautiful poetry. It's got nice, characters, but sacredness is out. And this is why I'm pointing it out, and they don't like it because it's such a subtle problem and they've fooled our people for too long. Thank you. Thank you. Please.
My name is Venkat. I have been following your post right from 1998 from the Indian Civilization, We've had some...
Sulekha days.
Okay, I have a very specific question. So when you talk about Indology, we cannot, we cannot avoid talking about linguistics.
Yes.
Right? So scholars like Koinadels, Karthik Venkatramani, which you should be in personal touch with. So they have a different take on the origin of Sanskrit or origin of Aryan or whatever. I mean, where this Vedic language actually originated. What's your take on that? I just wanted to understand your point of view. Specifically, Koinadels and also Karthik Venkatramani. Karthik Venkatramani is also known as Kalave Venkat and is a very staunch
See, I'll tell you my view.
Right.
My view is that the sequence has been reversed when they say that there is Sanskrit and then somebody sat down and wrote the Vedas. The Vedas are in a state of consciousness, the rishis have, in which the Vedas emerge as sounds, and then later these sounds become a language that you can use to order a cup of tea also, and so on. So I think the Vedas are earlier than the language. It's very different than any other language because nobody would say that something like Shakespeare came first and English came later or something like that. I mean, always language and then the prevailing surviving texts. But here's a case where a huge corpus of text emerges, and then the mental mind, which is a lower level than this rishi state, I call that the rishi state, at the lower level it turns it into conceptual ideas to make sense of it, because at the intellectual level we want to make sense of things. So then we come up with sort of a language analysis, linguistics and so on. So that's my view. So, and I feel that if you look at the Vedas themselves, so I don't want to look at the origin of Sanskrit, because if you look at the origin of Vedas, that will answer the question. If you look at the origin of Vedas, what they are describing is not found in Central Asia. There is no big ocean there, for one thing. And you look at the flora, fauna, B.B. Lal, a former director of the Archaeological Survey of India, a very, very good dharmic person, also an archaeologist, by the way, but in his case, looking with his dharmic eyes, looking for the dharmic messages in the archaeology. Very, very interesting. He has written a book, and I've talked to him at great length, amazing person, and he has shown very convincingly that the flora fauna in the Vedic literature is consistent with India and is not found in Central Asia. He's done that. Clinching evidence which will come. Vasant Shinde, who runs the Deccan College, VC Deccan College, he wrote one of our 10 volumes. We published 10 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. We've done that. One of them is by him. And he's just announced that for the first time they found human remains in a Harappan site with DNA. Previously, there was no DNA, So now they found something with DNA, and pretty old. So they're now looking at comparing that DNA with various populations. And for the first time, he feels that a convincing case will be made on who were the Harappans in terms of DNA genetically. And he's not giving away his story, he wants to publish it. I think he's a smart guy. So we'll wait and see what the story is.
Yeah. One more short question, sir.
Sure.
If I'm not taking much of your time. See, I have not read your book, been following your posts and all those things.
But you should read my books also.
Certainly do. I'll do that. Okay. Just a small observation.
I need to convince the publishers. Not only we got 40 times as many petitions, but these people actually buy my book and read my book, and therefore my books are important for future.
I am one of those 12,000. 12,000 people who have supported your.
Excellent. So now you should turn that support into books.
Sure, sir. Certainly. Okay. My question is this. So if you look at the evolution of Sanskrit per se, so Sanskrit did not have any written scriptures.
Yes.
Written style. So even the
Devanagari comes later.
Yeah, correct.
There's Brahmi, there's Prakrit.
Right. So have you bought this specifically in your book, or?
No, I haven't. This is not. This is not. I'm not teaching you Sanskrit in this book, and I'm not teaching you the beauty of Sanskrit, the greatness of Sanskrit. I'm doing only one thing, and that itself takes 500 pages. I'm doing a Purva Paksha Western Indology. So I'm taking what they have written, which is objectionable, which would be red flags in any audit. I'm kind of an auditor, saying these guys have done all this, and I'm auditing and coming up with red flags and coming up with reasons that there are problems. So that's what I'm working on. Just to tell you why I did this, you should know. In August or so 2014, I'm suddenly told that Sringeri Peetham is going to create a chair in Columbia University for representing and teaching and interpreting Adi Shankara. It will be called Adi Shankara Chair of Religion and Philosophy by Sringeri Peetham, something like that it was called. And it is funded by NRIs who put in $4-5 million, feeling very proud. And I was told that it's too late for you to raise questions because the Shankaracharya has already blessed it. Once he blesses it, he can't unbless it. There is no unblessing ritual, is what I was told. So it's too late if you have questions and so on. So you can just jump on board and so on. I could have just taken the easy way out and become very good guy in their books, like other NRIs there. So I raised questions. And this was a chair to be set up, and the selection committee and all that controlled by Sheldon Pollock, who's the subject of my Purva Paksha. So I said, my God, this is really bad news. Why are we outsourcing the ambassadorship of our tradition to people who are actually taking positions against it? I mean, he's more like a Charvak, or more like a Nastik, or more like a Charvak. And why would you take somebody like that and have them represent Adi Shankara? And I was told things like, Westerners are better scholars than Indians. I was told this kind of stuff. And I said, well, in that case, you should fund the Indians to become better. Raise their level. Raise their level. If you can do it with IT and with other things, you can do it with our tradition. Raise their level to international level. I'll work with them. So I was told all sorts of things why this is already a done deal and so on. So after arguing a lot with people in the US, both those who are funding this chair and the Shingeri Mutt people, representatives there, finding that I'm not getting anywhere, I decided I'll come to Shingeri and meet the Shankaracharya. And Mohanji came with me and a few other people. We went there, met the Shankaracharya, and basically said that I fully respect whatever your decision is, but all I want to do is to let you know what you guys will be getting into. I want to do a Purva Paksha. And you see, I found that Purva Paksha term is a magic term when you're talking to traditionalists. Without the term, they'll say things like, why should I worry about others? Truth is in my heart, or something like, everybody is the same, we're all good people. They talk all this kind of stuff, to kind of get out of the responsibility of looking at others and critiquing them. The moment you say, I'm doing Purva Paksha of Western Indology, in the same spirit as Adi Shankara did Purva Paksha of opponents, immediately they say, that's a very good idea, we ought to do it. I mean, that's how can they walk away from Purva Paksha being in the Shankara tradition, because that was his strength. So they liked the idea I'm doing Purva Paksha. I said I need a little time, I'll have my book out. I didn't have a book idea, I thought I'll do a 50-page paper. And then this 90-day project became 6 months, then it became longer, it ended up as a 500-page book. So I just want to start the tradition of Purva Paksha applied to those who control Indology today. And I'm not taking any personal shots at anybody. I just want to make sure that this happens in a respectful atmosphere, and I am not the best guy to do it. I just happen to be the one doing it, and I'd like others more qualified to take over.
My name is Supratik Bhattacharya.
Okay.
I just finished my 12th, so I'm in first year college. Okay, my question is slightly deviates from this. I would like to ask, like in the US, some decades back, we had what you call the culture war. The whole political landscape was influenced by that. I would say that my analysis is that India also is going through such a phase. If you see what the media does and how demographics is changing. So now my understanding is that let's say Western country has in a way won the culture war as on our side. I would say the only country is maybe Hungary, because of controlling the media, because the state controls the media to some extent, they have won the culture war. I would say maybe Russia has to some degree preserved its things. So, and the difference, that is where I would say this government has failed by allowing the media to, what is effectively a biased institution to influence government policy. They are, in the long run, I would say we are where the Republicans were in the Reagan high years. So after that, it was downhill for them.
Okay, let's forget.
So the question is, how do you win
let's
the
forget
culture
all
war?
those countries. You can just say that we are having a culture war in which the media is on the other side, and the government, rather than opposing them, is also joining them. We don't have to talk about Hungary and Russia and all that. We know, we all believe that what you're saying about India is true. I think people here believe that. So what is your question now?
So how do you win a culture war? No one's done it, almost.
Okay, so there's grassroots bottom up, which is my calling, because I'm not in charge. I don't control any institution. I have no institutional authority. I cannot go top down. Institutions in modern age have huge power. Educational institutions, media institutions, government policies, all these kind of things have huge power. But I have no capacity, formal position in any institution. So I basically spread knowledge to people like you, write books, create, and the way I get attention, the way I'm non-ignorable, is that I critique people with names, I name them, and they are important people, so they cannot ignore me. So they have to attack me, because if they tried ignoring me, it doesn't work, because I just become more intense, I raise the intensity of my critique. So they end up having to attack me. And when they attack me, it's very clear what their GPS coordinates are, what their intellectual coordinates, where they're coming from. It's very clear that they're attacking from a certain point of view. So this is my method of drawing them into the field, and then we can have a nice discussion. And this, each time I do this, and I've done this several times, it educates more people. More people get awakened, and more people sort of join this, and that's my contribution to it. Now, will it work? Will the other side win? Who knows? But I have no presence in mainstream media. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I can't do anything without that. But I have a lot of social media followers, and I really thank you for that, all of you. So the question is, what happened with the Shankara thing? It's still open, but 16 months have gone by, 18 months have gone by. The deal was, I was told in an email, it's a done deal. You can't do anything about it. It's a done deal to be announced in 4 weeks. I was told that 18 months ago, and it hasn't been announced. I don't believe they've signed it. That much I'm told. So at the very least, they put it on hold. At the very least. Now, if I can turn this into a permanent sort of not doing it kind of deal, turning it down and under some pretext, whatever nice way to get out and face everybody and not have it happen, I will consider this to be, without any doubt, the most important accomplishment of my whole life, because of the strategic value. If you can save Sringeri, you can save all the mathas. On the other hand, if you lose this Sringeri representation in the West to atheists and anti-Hindu kind of people, then one after another domino will fall. They'll do this to every place, using it as a precedent. So therefore, to me, it is so important. And this, what I just told you, is the first chapter of this book. The very first chapter of this book is why I wrote the book. So please read it.
My name is Arun. I am an alumni from IIT Madras. So I have 2 or 3 comments. The first one was about the oral tradition. If you look at the Wikipedia webpage of Vedic chanting, I think UNESCO has assigned a status of probably, it is given a heritage status by the UNESCO. So I think even if the Westerners, academicians, they attack the Vedic chanting, even the UNESCO itself has given a heritage status. That is very important.
But let me tell you, this is an example of praising something. Westerners don't deny that it's great. The allegation is not that about whether it's beautiful and all that stuff. Chanting is done. But chanting can also be that it has really got no legitimacy as a process that claims to be a process that produces some effect. Vedic chanting is a chanting of Shruti that affects your consciousness. It produces a certain effect. I can appreciate it like the archaeologist appreciating the painting or something in a purely secular way. So the question is not whether they appreciate Vedic chanting, whether this word heritage includes the sacredness as a legitimacy of that tradition. That is a fine-tuning you have to look at. Okay. Yeah, otherwise, you're also just... often our government, all the governments, they fall short of the sacredness of our claim. The yoga, when there was an International Yoga Day, the video or the description that was spread out unofficially, I don't know how many of you know this, did not have the sacredness. The link with, and it did not have Om. It did not have the Vedic link. People just went out angry. Yeah. In my e-group, people went out and said, this is complete sellout. Our government doing it. It's better not to have a yoga day than to make it authoritative that this secularized yoga is the legitimate one. If the Indian government does it, then it will become the standard. And then there was a lot of back and forth. And then the government said, no, we are going to have Om. So, it means that there's always this, we are always kind of at the edge of losing this sacredness. Even our own people find that it is baggage or it's some kind of embarrassment, but we have to be very clear about this. There is cognitive science where they're looking at chants, they're looking at the effect on the mind, they are looking at meditation. These are not just empirical studies in neuroscience, which are very positive, very interesting, but also theoretical models being built about consciousness. The Hindu meditators, Buddhist meditators are highly sought after in these kind of researches because that they are able to produce states of consciousness that neuroscience a few years ago didn't know were even possible. So the link of sacredness to higher states of consciousness and effects on disease, effects on all kinds of neurological conditions is becoming more and more studied. I would like our people to study it and constantly make sure in the papers they publish they give the Vedic references. And it should not be that subject 3, subject number 7 produced this and subject number 12 through 15 produced that, like they are some kind of anonymous people. Well, who are they? They are Vedic people. They're performing a particular kind of mantra. That ought to be mentioned. But often in the clinical studies that are being published, Some of them getting huge recognition. The Vedic origins of this is not being mentioned. So yes, our meditation tradition is doing very well. UN will do this and some guys will get Nobel Prizes. But that does not bring credit back and link back to the Vedic tradition the way I would like it. So my requirement is much more serious and much more demanding than what these kind of recognitions are giving.
Just a comment on that. I think in July, in the Journal of Neurology, one paper was published which studied the brain structure of the people who have learned Vedic chanting. And they actually found that the brain structure of these people is different from what is the normal structure. So there is some upcoming evidence on that.
Yes.
Right. My second comment was on
the people who've done the maximum in this are Dalai Lama's people. Dalai Lama's people have worked a lot on establishing their side, and Maharishi's people have done a lot. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's people have done a lot of this kind of research. But what is happening is that their research is often being considered as biased, it's religion and whatnot.
No, they have used CAT scans to find the brain structure, actual structure. The physical, they find physical changes in the brain, which is much different. I mean, they find more white matter and gray matter. And
so some of these studies started in the 60s and 70s with Maharishi people, Maharishi University, and they started this whole research on the effects of meditation, the measurable physical, material, biological effects of meditation. Without any doubt, they pioneered this whole area, and it was considered some kind of biased stuff. Okay. And a Harvard guy called Herb Benson. Herb Benson is a Harvard man. He's now in his 90s. He learned transcendental meditation, and he then took the same technique, developed his own look-alike, did not credit the Maharishi movement, and he called it the relaxation response. And he started teaching undergraduates the relaxation response, replicating all the studies that Maharishi was doing in his own way without mentioning anything about Vedic stuff, became very, very famous, and established all these studies as some kind of a secular meditation going on.
My second comment is about the Purva Paksha. Where should the actual seeds of Purva Paksha be sown? Because if you look at the history textbooks which are taught in the school, they are like totally watered down. And if you, in my opinion, the Sanatana Dharma till now has survived because it was practiced locally in individual houses. Actually, the temple was just a meeting place for all the people where, you know, as a group, the thing was.
So let me answer your question. You just tell me the question and I'll answer it.
Yeah.
So where should the seeds of Purva Paksha be sown? The seeds of Purva Paksha, I'm trying to gather good traditional scholars of Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts, in particular in Tamil Nadu and in Karnataka and wherever else I can find them. But I think there's a good chance that this should be the home base, and I would like to teach them, like the head of the school, the university this morning. She said that we don't know where to look for the problems and the issues. If you tell us where the problems are, what the issues are, we can give the response. So I have to do the Purva Paksha, and the traditional scholars have to give the Uttar. I have to say this is what the problems are which are being written. They have to give the responses. This is how I think the seeds have to be planted. I would like in the next year or so to have created a team of 5 to 10 traditional scholars who've done a good solid response to Western Indology on certain topics. And I need some funding for that, because these people, I don't need any for myself, but to hire these kind of people, give them some time, some travel and whatnot, it'll take some resources. Assuming we can get that, I think I've identified the talent. I've identified good scholars who are the kind we need. So if in a year we can prepare a home team of such scholars, then we'd like to challenge the opposing side to come and debate. And we'll have a team to debate. And that's how we start taking our tradition back. We need to take the tradition back into Swadeshi Indology. That's what I'd like to do.
But at a more fundamental level, shouldn't the textbooks also reflect this? I mean,
that's a different matter.
Yeah.
The Purva Paksha is at the knowledge production level. Textbook is a part of the distribution of knowledge. So first there is a knowledge production. We have to become a knowledge producing.
You're saying the discourse has been totally taken over by them. So
that's
you first have to get back what is ours, and then you can probably control the discourse. What you're saying.
We have to challenge the interpretation.
Yeah.
And then our interpretation can filter down to media, to textbooks, to whatnot. Because right now, you cannot change textbooks and media while the discourse at the higher academy level, at the academic level remains on the other side, because you cannot disconnect the discourse, the intellectual discourse from its popular representation, from the popular distribution.
My name is Kishore. I am a PhD student in Mechanical Engineering Department. In your book, Breaking India, you have made one Mr. Devanayagam thesis as reference in so many times, especially that Dravidian Aryan theory and all. Can you please tell more details on that thesis?
Well, basically, this is book many books back, so I don't fully recall, but I'll tell you what I know, what I think I've said there. Basically, I've written the history of how the Aryan Dravidian starts with Max Muller and with Robert Caldwell, and then how for a while the church actually doesn't. A lot of Westerners don't accept it. It becomes accepted about 120 years ago only. It's kind of something that is to be taken seriously. And then in the rise of Dravidian politics, the Dravidian politics rise with this Dravidianization. Actually, the CIA plays a role. They take one young fellow, I've forgotten his name, who taken to Yale University and given a lot of publicity, and he becomes a kind of a fiery spokesman. Once the Dravidian parties start, then they start funding a lot of this identity engineering, It is not Christianized initially. It's just a secular kind of, reaction against Nehru's Hindi and kind of thing, It's more of a regional reaction. It is not yet Christianized. It is not co-opted by the Christian people at that point in time. Although Robert Caldwell was a Christian and he had started this whole ball rolling. So later, now the champions who are promoting this the church is very much behind it. So what got me interested is, I think it was 2000 and something, I've forgotten the exact year, there was a conference on history, South Indian history in New York. And Hillary Clinton endorsed it. I have it written, I have these details there. I got the flyer, and Hillary Clinton endorsed it, and their proceedings is very interesting. The whole thing is revised history of South India, the whole history of South India. And so I think there are a couple.
You told Lemuria theory.
Lemuria theory is there. These guys are there. There are many people there. Now, since all that has happened, much more has transpired. If I had the time, I would do a new edition, because the characters are far more dangerous now. They've become more educated, better funded, well-fed, and they are on the road fighting. They are not running away. So this battle of the Dravidian fault line and the Dalit fault line and the role of Christianity and the role of Western funding, the Western left and the Western right, is becoming more intense. So that's really what it's about. That's what my goal is to. I'm not taking shots at one individual. I use individuals to make a point.
Because you have several times you have referred that thesis.
Yes.
You told that it is not having any basis, and you have said that again and again.
Yeah, and also the St. Thomas.
Actually, I didn't get time to read that thesis.
Yeah. So also this whole St. Thomas is a fabrication that the archaeological people have said that. I mean, I've talked to many archaeological people, this business that this whole fabrication of St. Thomas coming here, and then he started all these things, and they found his place, his actual archaeological sites and whatnot. There are no archaeological sites like that the Archaeological Survey is willing to certify. Even during the Sonia Gandhi era, they were not willing to certify that these are genuine, authentic archaeological sites. So I think a lot of history gets made up and fabricated, and this is an example of that. The whole Aryan theory, I think, is an example of that.
Some articles I read that US is using the Sanskrit for some programming purposes, for developing some system on intelligence.
Computational linguistics.
So what is your view? What should be the Indian government strategy to revive the glory of Sanskrit?
No, it's not about glory of Sanskrit. There's nothing to do with glory of Sanskrit. Computational linguistics takes the structures of Sanskrit grammar, Panini's grammar, use it for computational purposes, has a lot of application in natural language translation. So if somebody is speaking in Japanese and somebody else wants to hear it in French, and the guy speaks in French and this guy hears in Japanese, you want to do it in real time. This is one of the applications of computational linguistics. So the Panini grammar is considered a very efficient engine. So this whole business, what the good, I'll tell you the good side and the bad side. I'm very concerned about it also. The good side is that the Sanskrit grammar and its the style, the whole writing of Sanskrit, its structure is being used in a very good way to do this computational linguistics, which has real applications. So that's the positive part. The concern part I have is that in the process of turning Sanskrit into something friendly for computational linguistics, there are people like B.V.K. Shastri, a very well-known person in this field. He is concerned that the intonations and some of the real subtle aspects of Sanskrit are being erased to make it computer friendly. Yeah. So we may, similar to removing the sacred, we may be removing certain very subtle vibrational qualities of Sanskrit because the Westerners don't care about it. They don't care about these very subtle things. To them, it makes no difference. They're just interested in capturing the gross major point out of it. And our people are going along with it. So that's a concern.
So, sir, my question is, why the Indian government is not looking into that these kind of researches and usage?
No, Indian government is also involved in that. My concern is that Indian government is a follower rather than a leader. The main projects for computational linguistics are being done in the West. And Sanskrit people are, the brightest, best Sanskrit people are being pulled out and given money grants to go there and do it. Indian government is following along that, they're not taking the lead.
Sir, I have come from Bombay. I'm not from this place. My name is Mr. Muttigi, retired from TISS. If you remember, I buy all your books and read.
Thank you. I'm very happy.
And, I have prepared a summary of all the books and circulated among the people in Bombay, particularly among the senior citizens. My question to you is today.
Are you going to be at the TISS meeting?
No.
I think on the 20th.
I retired long ago.
Oh, so you don't live there anymore.
Nobody recognized me there.
Okay.
Long back I retired. My question is, sir, in your writings, I didn't find any self-introspection on the part of the Hindus. Didn't find anywhere. I tried my best to get it.
Yes.
And can you enlighten on that? Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. Certainly, there's many things to write about. I could write a critique of Hinduism. I could write good things about Hinduism. I'm neither critiquing Hinduism nor writing the glory of Hinduism. That also I'm not writing in these books. I'm doing a Purv Paksh in the West. Yeah. And I'm doing a Purv Paksh in the West because I found a gap in the intellectual discourse which nobody is covering, and I decided that as an opportunistic person, I was in IT at one time, I was always looking for market gaps where nobody's doing. I filled that gap, and that's my opportunity. Yeah. So I think that in the intellectual space, as an outsider, not trained all my life in doing this, I was trained as a physicist, computer scientist, all that. Yeah. And then at the age of 44, I gave up and did this. Too old to go back and learn the humanities. So I figured that I should go where I can do something where I have knowledge. Yeah. So one of the knowledges I bring, one of the knowledges I bring is that I used to, as a management consultant, I used to do industry analysis. So you do an industry analysis of some industry, airlines or hotels. You look at who are the players, what are they good, bad, who funds it, how the industry works, what are the trends. So I started looking at Indology as an industry because I am an industry analyst. I bring something. None of the Indologists who are practicing are an industry analyst. They don't know how to analyze an industry. I know how to analyze an industry. So I get started by saying something about their industry which they don't know. So I started building a database on who's who in Indology, who funds what are the consequences, and what are the issues, what are the biases. So I started looking at the macro level as an industry. That's how I started. And the reason I had to start, another reason I started this way is I was giving large grants in Indology at one time. I was funding Indology chair in Indology roundtable in Harvard, visiting professors here and there, Columbia. I did all of that. So while I was giving grants to them, I also wanted to analyze what they're doing. And the method of analysis that I could use is as an industry analyst. So I started it like that. I didn't start it like a Hindu or anything like that. I started as an industry analyst. And this led me to problems. This led me to their defensiveness. They're attacking, saying, don't analyze us. Who are you to analyze us? So I said, okay, I'll analyze you even more, because if you are scared of my analysis, there must be something you're hiding. So it's almost like you're following a thief and he takes you somewhere. And you end up where he takes you. And when I started my foundation, I had no idea where I'll lead. I just got led by one project, led me to the next, led me to the next. So if you look at some of the historical anecdotes I've given about my own journey, you will see why I ended up talking about this. I did not even intend to do this. So I'm not writing about Hinduism and its critique or its... I do have some books of that kind also in the pipeline, but I have not produced them. I have books on my interpretation of Vedic culture, good, bad, everything, and its future. I have not written that, published that yet.
Hello, I'm Dheeraj. So I have one question is, so I've read halfway through one of the books, okay, that, so there's one thing you talk about this psychoanalysis that these Westerners are doing, like Wendy Doninger, they're doing about a fourth thing, like there's a thing about Ramakrishna Paramhans, they have
right,
done
I
this,
understand, but yeah, what's your question?
So the question is, how do you suggest we can go about doing the Purva Paksha and the Uttar Paksha with the psychoanalysis of the things that they are doing, where in our case there are things that we cannot explain in words. You see, it's the belief. There are things that are anirvachaniya. So how do you go about the psychoanalysis?
Yeah. So my 5 books, this is the 5th one, each opens a new battlefield. Okay. So the Invading the Sacred opened a battlefield of challenging Western psychoanalysis of deities. Yeah. Let me now answer it. Let me just chance. So that book was my opening the battlefield, and I hoped that Hindu psychology people, people trained in cognitive sciences, would then be the home team and continue that work. 10 years later, they have not done it. What I had done, basically, people just sort of, it became a very emotional thing and people started fighting, Wendy Doninger and all that. That was not the intent. So I did an intellectual piece of work. I expected people to take that even further, but they didn't do that. Similarly, in Breaking India, I did it's a different battlefield. It is not the same thing. And being different is a different battlefield. Indra's Net is another one. This is another one. Each one, I define a battlefield, define the other side, what they are doing, why it's wrong, what's an issue, do a Purva Paksha. And my goal is that I want more people to join me in taking this intellectual discourse further. But what I find is our people merely recycle the same knowledge. People just quote and recycle, either quoting me or not quoting me in their own words. They just recycle the same knowledge. So 10 years later, we are no further than we were. So this is a problem I have. I could stick to one topic and just keep going deeper all my life. Or I could, every year or two, produce another topic, completely different topic. I have chosen the second approach. I want to define a lot of battlefields. But I'm hoping that others will join and follow, but they are not. So we haven't had enough energy and enough disciplined, rigor approach to critiquing these things further and further. Now, I'm not the only one doing it. There's a lot of good people doing this. I'm just telling you about my scholarship. I wanted serious people in psychology to take up this issue of Freudian psychoanalysis and take it further, and that didn't happen. So it's more or less where the book was 10 years ago.
No, so my question is, so you collecting these people from India, doing this Purva and Uttar Paksh,
right,
you'll be doing regarding Sanskrit only or with the psychoanalysis things also?
No, this particular project I'm now doing is just based on the battle for Sanskrit work. Okay. It is this battle. It is Indology. It's about 10 specific issues with the Vedas, with the Ramayana, with Kavya, with Shastras, with whether Sanskrit is dead or alive, whether it is oppressive or liberating. I'm just taking the issues raised in this book and building a home team of intellectuals only concerning this particular book, not my previous books.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Shwetambar Das, I am in physics department. I'm doing PhD here. So I've got two questions. Maybe the way we are trained, the mental conditioning that we have over the years. So one is why this sacred is important. I mean, I sort of understand it, but I want an answer to that.
Well, sacredness is important if we feel that is the nature of reality. It is not important as something we create. Sacredness, if my worldview is that I have experienced in a meditative state, and I believe I've understood it, that sacredness, this cosmos is a sacred entity. This whole cosmos is divine, and we are a manifestation of that. It is not a question of why it's important. It's a question, this is the truth. Therefore, I have to transmit the truth. And I'm practicing this my lifestyle is truth I'm practicing. And I don't want someone to keep abusing me and telling me I'm oppressive and I'm this and that. Okay, basically, they should leave me alone, get lost and do their own thing somewhere else, and don't do Indology. Because Indology, if to me it means sacred, it's like you go to another country and they're doing a ritual, it's very sacred to them. My principle is I have no business interrupting. I have no business telling them that they're wrong, converting them, this or that. I leave them with respect. I either listen to them, learn, maybe I'll learn a few new things. And if I don't understand it, I'd leave them with respect, leave them alone. Yeah. And all I'm saying is we as a tradition would like to be left alone rather than constantly being bombarded with why we are wrong for this reason or that reason. And this Western Indology is a huge attack mechanism.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. So I just wanted to know, maybe we can talk about later, because it's the sacred thing that we have, and I'm kind of I understand it, but then I really want to feel the way it is.
So you want to experience the sacred.
Yes.
Okay. Now that has nothing to do with Western Indology.
Yeah.
Because then you should say whether whatever they say is irrelevant.
Yeah.
I as an individual want to experience the sacredness.
Yes.
You should join one of these good contemporary meditation organizations, because there is an intellectual route which says that you study a lot of pravachan and you get convinced logically. Some people it works.
Yes.
And that may. There is the emotional route, which you go to bhakti a lot, and then you feel a certain state of consciousness that comes through bhakti.
Yes.
Then there is the meditation route, where you go through in a meditation process, you actually get experiences. And then you are very convinced once you get your experience, you'll never be the same guy again. And then you will not need an Indologist to tell you this way or that way. You will basically be saying, listen, there's no way you can convince me. I'm one of those insiders mentioned in this book. You cannot convince me. You can just keep abusing me and I wish you'd go away. That is all you'll be able to say.
Yes.
And the previous question. And the previous question also, that why are we deficient in our communication that we can't explain to them? The point is that if a person hasn't seen color, they have monochrome vision. No matter how good articulate you are, you cannot explain to them what is yellowness, what is redness, because you can't explain it. So there's a certain opening of consciousness that those who have been privileged to experience are indeed very fortunate. I will tell you that. And we live in a society where rather than nurturing that from childhood and rather than in the education system giving that kind of indoctrination or that idea, that experience, we are suppressing it, we're killing it. And that is, I think, is a problem. We are harming society by denying them what is a very natural human thing, which is the quest for the spiritual.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, my name is John Wesley. Sir,
name is
John Wesley.
Good. Okay.
Last
question, he said.
In India, I'm seeing majorly recruitment process or admission process. It's mainly based on caste system, or maybe caste system. So when you see the constitution of Western countries, we are seeing principle of equality to each and everything. Then I'm seeing caste system is the major oppression in India. So who brought the caste system into the India? What is the major source for Lord Wesley to consider this?
Okay, so you read Breaking India, but I'll give you, because I'm being told we have to leave. So I'll give you 1 minute version. Okay. There was this theory of evolution by Darwin, and he did not want it applied to human beings. He said there's no less and more evolved races. He said so. But some of his students who were racists wanted to show the superiority of the West and inferiority of the people they've colonized, and they wanted to put it in the evolution system. So Risley's mentor was somebody who used, and the name is given in my book there, in Breaking India. He introduced this idea that we can apply evolution to races. So he came up with this thing that some are higher, some are lower and all that. So Risley was sent to turn India into that scheme of hierarchy of people, some inferior, some superior. And so he was looking for trying out this with data collection and gathering and whatnot. So they tried a lot of, there was this mention, they were also looking at nose index, this length of the nose and certain facial parameters they would measure, and then they would come up with some kind of a mathematical system to tell whether you are higher or lower evolved, because they felt that evolution goes from the perfect white look facial and to down to other people. Sorry, it evolves from the Africans who are down up to other people. So we were somewhere in between, we people. And so then many different systems of ideas were developed on how to classify races according to a scale of evolution. So Risley came and he writes that he discovered this idea of caste, and he feels that this, or jati and all, he feels that this is a perfect place to apply his theory of hierarchy of races. So he comes up with this idea, and they do a census of India, the first time ever. And in that census, they want to classify every person in a hierarchy of races, of castes. So these castes are listed in a linear sequence. No two are the same. There cannot be two equal. Everybody has to have one level each. So you are number 19, somebody is number 35, like that. And in his first, they go around asking everybody to count themselves, their particular caste. And he complains that a lot of these people argue that they don't belong in the hierarchy where I've given them the assignment. I've assigned them a place and they don't even believe in it. There are cases where people put petitions saying that you put me in the wrong place, I'm not in that, my caste is not there, it's higher, lower, whatever. So this was not some kind of an Indian system which he was doing, he was imposing his system. And there was resistance to his system from the people. So every 10 years he keeps repeating this, he does 3 or 4 censuses, one every decade. So during that 40-year period, this becomes fixed, because then the British government, in order for you to get any services from the government or whatever, you have to write your name, your father's name, and your caste. And so it's like, sort of like you have this Adhyar card kind of thing. So there was this caste, was this system of marking each person, without which you were not a citizen to be counted who could get his rights. You know, certain jatis were declared criminal tribes. There were like 80 or so criminal tribes. There's an act called the Criminal Tribes Act of India. And in this Criminal Tribes Act, they classified all those jatis. They were fighting this system. They were fighting the British. They were militant. They did not want to be treated a certain way. Some of them were Kali worshippers, like that. And so the British were very scared of these people. And some of them were classified criminal because the British were cutting the forest to export the wood which they needed. And so these people were fighting as militants, they were fighting the British. So the British considered them to be criminal tribes. So they were not, they were a British creation that they are criminals, and hence it was legal that person by birth is a criminal. He hasn't done anything. He just born by virtue of birth in a tribe. He is declared a criminal, and these tribes were to be exterminated. And the term thug, we consider thug, we've adopted this term. We think that thugs are a bunch of those kind of people, but they were just a regular tribe. They were one of the tribes declared criminal, and so in the English language, to be called a thug became a normal way to criminalize somebody. So when we call somebody a thug, actually we are playing into this Orientalism. We've adopted this colonial Orientalism because it's become part of our language. So this is the origin of this, how caste system started. Now, the Indian government should have created something different, should have said that a lot of people are underprivileged, they need help. So there should be affirmative action and quota on individual merit. Okay, see, in the US, when you apply to colleges, they make you fill out a form if you want financial aid. And it is entirely based, they don't ask you your religion, it is not asked. They will ask your family income, your family balance sheet, and if you are looking for it, you may have to supply last 2-3 years of tax return to prove. And then you are based on your financial need and other needs and all, maybe if you're physically handicapped, those kind of needs and all, they will put you on a scale of your need. You give a number. And then that is your number of, to what extent you are a person in need. India should do something like that. It should have nothing to do with you belong to this caste and all those people are entitled more than someone else. That's a recipe for clashes between groups and other groups, where these social scientists have a great lot of fun to work with politicians who fund these guys to dish out a scholarship to show that this caste was a victim of that caste so many years back, and the politician will come and save them. So this idea that your caste has been accused and your caste is the reason for your poverty and I'm the savior, you vote for me, I'll go into power and then I'll get you better quota. So this casteism is basically a lobby system. Americans have lobby groups. We have caste lobby groups. It's nothing to do with spirituality. It is nothing to do with dharma. It is really not the same as jati and varna were once. It has just become a political lobby system. And unfortunately, democracy has made it even worse because the people cluster into their caste groups in order to hold together and lobby. So if you want to break the caste system, then the way is not that you put one caste and another caste and negotiate who gets what. That is a way to strengthen. The caste system is becoming stronger by the quotas. Okay. So the way to break the caste system is you turn it into individual level need. The need should be on an individual level. And that's the level at which you assess the need and you decide what kind of benefits the person needs. So that would break the caste system.
I would like to thank our guest Rajiv sir and all faculty members present here and the audience to join us for this program. So now I would request Dr. Devendra Jalihal to present a memento to our guest as a token of gratitude. I request you all to please join us for the national anthem now.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय जय जय